Finding the right items for your desk is hard. The research is time-consuming, and realizing that something that you've purchased isn't quite right for you is frustrating and expensive. Over the last 8 years of working from home, I've done a ton of research and tried countless combinations of things. And in today's video, I'm going to share with you the items that have stuck for me. I'm going to break this video down into 3 parts. We'll start with work mode, we'll switch into game mode, and for those who are curious and stick around, I'll show you what I use to create the YouTube videos on this channel. If you see anything that catches your eye, I'll have links to everything that I mentioned down in the comments. And as always, feel free to skip around. I'll have timestamps down below. Let's get started with work mode, and I think it probably makes sense to start with the desk, which is this fully Jarvis desk. I think this is one of the wider sizes, as I wanted room to have things here on both the left and the right, because I often have things occupying my desk. And then it also has this cutout in the middle so that I can get closer to my monitors if I need to. I'm nearsighted, and so I have the luxury of, if I get close enough, I don't actually need to wear my glasses. So a lot of times you'll see them on my head or over here on the side. Next up is the chair, which is a Herman Miller Embody. It's incredibly expensive, but it's comfortable, and more importantly, it keeps me from hurting myself, even if I spend more time than I probably should here at my desk. The next most important thing after the chair and the desk is probably the thing that powers all of this, which is an M1 MacBook Pro. And this thing is amazing. It reminds me of the old MacBooks before they went to USB-C and unibody. The keyboard is excellent, battery life is great, and it has plenty of computing power. I've yet to really run into a situation where it can't do what I want to do without breaking a sweat. I use my MacBook Pro pretty much exclusively in clamshell mode, and you'll see it in this Grovemade desk stand. The kind folks over at Grovemade sent me a bunch of stuff for my desk a while back, and their stuff is really awesome. This video is not sponsored by Grovemade, but I did end up really liking a lot of the stuff they sent me, and it stayed on the desk. Coming out of my MacBook, you'll find 4 cables: a USB-C to DisplayPort, a USB-C to my hub, a power cable, and an HDMI cable. Typically, I would just have 2 cables coming out of my MacBook, one for a USB-C to DisplayPort to go to this monitor here on the left, and the other was to a Union USB-C hub, which would have an HDMI, a USB-C for power, and then a USB-C that would go to my displays, and then I would plug all my USB devices into those displays. But the USB hub on this main monitor started going bad and became flaky, and in the process I realized that the native MacBook Pro HDMI port can actually output 1080p at 240 Hz. Whereas all of the USB-C hubs cap out at 120. So that was enough of a reason for me to switch, and why I went from 2 cables to 4. I've since swapped out the Union hub with a pluggable powered USB hub that outputs USB 3.0 speeds to all of the ports. I was surprised to see how much of a pain it was to find a USB hub that actually does that. I tried this Sobrent 10-port 60 watt USB 3.0 hub, but it didn't actually output USB 3.0 speeds, and that's what I needed for my SSDs, so I quickly returned it. For my keyboard, I used the Drop Alt Signature Series Space Race. It's heavy and feels extremely premium. I splurged a bit when I got it because at the time I was considering a custom keyboard, and Drop announced this one, and it ended up having all of the parts I was planning on buying separately, and was definitely the easier route to go. Overall, I really enjoy it. If I were to have a critique for it, I'd say the stock stabilizers are trash, but I've since replaced those and gotten it to a pretty good point. I also took out all the switches and lubed them, which was painstaking and took forever, but it really does help a ton with the typing experience. My Remarkable 2 stays here pretty much all the time. It lives here right in front of my keyboard where I can jot down quick notes and sketch out ideas. Before eInk tablets, I used to use a Moleskine or a Baron Fig Confidant, but the Remarkable now serves that purpose and has all of my notes in one place that's backed up. And I don't have to worry about losing a notebook along the way. I also use with it the Kaweco All Sport EMR Connect pen that I leave here in this cork case from the Studio Neat Mark I. But I'll get more into that here in a bit. They both sit atop this Grovemade leather desk pad, which I really love. It dampens the sound from my keyboard and brings some comfort and life to my desk. Note that it is real leather and it does wear over time, so if that gives you anxiety, please steer clear. But for me, I really like that sort of thing. Like, for example, I use a Nomad Leather Case on my iPad Pro, and I really like that it develops more character over time. My mouse is pretty darn simple. It's the Logitech G305, which is a simple, small wireless mouse that is rock solid, and the battery life is really, really good. Probably the weirdest thing on my desk is the Sonos Beam, which is a home theater speaker. Historically, I've had a really horrible set of desk speakers here, and I really hated them, but I hadn't found a set of speakers that I liked enough to replace them with. A few months ago, I ended up replacing the Sonos Beam in our living room with the Beam Gen 2 so that we could have Dolby Atmos audio, and I ended up with this extra Sonos Beam. The more I thought about it, this speaker was way better than other speakers I would consider buying to put on this desk, so I just needed to figure out a way to get audio into it. It probably makes sense to mention the other audio setup going on the desk. For audio, I use a Schiit Modi 3, and that runs into the JDS Labs Atom Plus. Before the Atom Plus, I was using the Schiit Magni Heresy, but I've had two of those, and they both ended up having the same issue where one of the two channels dies, and I was just tired of messing with it. The JDS Atom Plus sounds just as good, maybe even a little bit better, and has been significantly more reliable. Getting back to the Sonos Beam, I have that being fed out of an RCA cable out of the back of the Atom Plus. The convenience here is that when I have my headphones plugged in, the audio goes into my headphones, and when I unplug them, it goes to the Sonos Beam. From that RCA cable, it runs into this analog to digital audio converter that I can then plug into the back of the Beam via its HDMI port. I was a little worried that this was going to have bad audio quality or a bunch of latency, but both have actually been really good, and I just love the look of it on my desk. When I'm not using the Sonos, I use one of two sets of headphones. The first is an open back set, which is the Hifiman Sundaras, which are incredibly open and have a ton of clarity. They're really nice if you like to listen to fast, complicated music like jazz or metal, and I really enjoy them for deep listening. The other headphones that I use are the Apple AirPods Pro version 2. I used to have a set of Beyerdynamic DT1770 Pros, but I found that I always ended up using the AirPods, so I ended up selling the Beyerdynamics. The original AirPods Pro were already great for focus, and the new ones actually sound good. I won't spend any more time talking about them here, but if you're curious about my thoughts on them, I'll have a link to a video up here. Another thing that I really love on my desk is this MagSafe stand. It's also from Grovemade, and it's made of steel, and it's incredibly heavy. It's something that I didn't know I needed until I had it. Now my phone sits over here and charges, and if I get an important message, I can look over at it and it'll unlock and show me the message. And then whenever I close down for the day, I'll just throw my AirPods up there to charge. Over here on the side, I have a little pen cup with all of my eInk, styluses, and then also a highlighter, a Sharpie, and the Studio Neat Mark I. As far as styluses go, I've got the Lamy All-Star, I've got the Samsung S Pen, and then the Kaweco is over here sitting on the Sonos. I don't do a ton of analog writing anymore, but back when I did, I really enjoyed the Studio Neat Mark I, which is an excellent little pen that's made from a single piece of aluminum that they've hollowed out, and it just feels premium all the way. I work from home majority of the time, but if I do decide to work somewhere else, then I use the Evergoods CPL24 mirror. Let me grab that for you. This thing. Inside the bag are probably the things that you would expect. I've got toiletries for travel, a MacBook charger, an iPhone charger, and then like a uni USB-C dongle in case I need it. All right, so let's move to the gaming setup, which is actually really simple. It basically runs all the same stuff that we were showing for work, but with a couple additions. Obviously, I don't game on a Mac, and so I have to switch everything from Mac to PC. And that's actually incredibly easy because I can just change this one cable on the Pluggable, and that will move all of my USB peripherals from my Mac to my PC. In the past, I've tried a button switch USB hub, but I later found that it introduced a bunch of latency, and that was a no-go for gaming. While on the topic of latency, ever since then, I've gotten really weird about USB latency, and I actually plug my gaming mouse directly into my motherboard. I've got no reason to believe that the Pluggable would introduce any latency, but at this point, I'm not gonna take any chances. The Jarvis desk that I mentioned at the beginning of the video is a sit-stand desk, and my gaming PC is mounted here under it, and so that when you raise the desk, it goes up and down with it so that the cords don't get strained. My gaming mouse of choice is the Endgame Gear XM1. I've tried a ton of mice, and this just happens to be the one that fits me the best. If you're curious everything else I've tried, let me know down in the comments, and I'm happy to share with you the details. My wife still gives me hell about the collection of gaming mice up here on the shelf. When I do game, it's almost exclusively Overwatch or Rocket League, and for Rocket League, I use the Sony DualSense wireless controller. I run it exclusively wired, and you can set it to 1000 Hz refresh. That is, in my opinion, top tier for Rocket League. For monitors, I use the same two monitors for everything. It's these two gaming monitors. The one here on the left is a 24-inch Dell 1440p 165 Hz monitor. This used to be my primary monitor before I decided that I wanted 240 Hz refresh rate. My main monitor is now a 24-inch Alienware 1080p 240 Hz monitor. They're both TN panels, so perhaps not the greatest for design and video work, but in practice, they've been just fine for me. Switching over to YouTube, I use a combination of DaVinci Resolve and Descript, and the new thing that I've been enjoying is the DaVinci Resolve Speed Editor. I'm still by no means an expert in it, but it does make editing a lot more enjoyable. As far as cameras go, I use two Sony ZV-E10s, one over here on the side, and then another that's either above my monitor or way up above for top-down desk shots. As far as lenses go, on this main camera, I'm using a Sigma 16mm, I think it's an f1.4, and it's absolutely amazing. I also use a Sigma 30mm up here on top for all of my overhead shots, and I feed all of that back into my computer with either the Razer Ripsaw X or the Elgato Camlink. I've noticed that the Ripsaw is way less finicky than the Camlink, but the Ripsaw does have a bit of a green hue to it, so if you're sensitive to that, take that into account. As far as microphones go, I use the Rode VideoMic NTG, which I use for both work and YouTube, and it does both extremely well. The main reason why I got the NTG is I wanted great audio quality while not having to have a microphone directly in the frame. In my early videos, I used the Samsung Q2U, which sounds great, but it has to be in the frame to perform its best. The other nice thing about the video mic is I no longer need a microphone boom arm on my desk. The mic just sits above my desk in the same position whether I'm working or recording a video. For audio recording, I use the Zoom F2 recorder, which I stumbled into because I noticed that the video mic NTG sounded better over USB than directly into the ZV-E10. And after playing with it a good bit, I realized that it's actually the camera preamps that were the problem. So I got the Zoom F2, and now the NTG sounds exactly the same into that as it does over USB. Also has the benefit of being a 32-bit floating audio recorder, and so I never have to worry about clipping at the recorder anymore. For lighting, I use the Godox SL150W II. I tried the Godox SL60W, which is significantly less expensive, but I want zero sound distractions while I'm working and trying to focus. So I splurged and got the SL150, which makes no sound whatsoever. In front of it is this Neewer 24-inch beauty dish and octagonal softbox. And while we're on the subject of lighting, I do have two other lights that I use for random odds and ends. I have the Aputure MC, which is very good but expensive, and the Neewer RGB61. I actually bought both of these at the exact same time because I wanted to see if the Aputure was actually worth the significant price difference over the Neewer, as I didn't have a ton of experience with these types of lights before then. For example, the Aputure is like $90 and the Neewer is $23. At the end of the day, the Aputure is significantly better, but the Neewer is still very good. So I ended up keeping both of them, and I'm really glad that I did. I keep the Aputure on a Joby Gorillapod, and the Neewer's on this clip that I hacked together with an umbrella stand to make this little pivot point to get the angle just right. I use a iLoxney teleprompter, which I can't pronounce, but it's cheap and it's decent. When I bought it, I wasn't exactly sold that a teleprompter would be useful, but now I have a hard time doing a scripted video without it. It does the job well enough, and I really have no reason to replace it. If I'm nitpicking it, I wish it had a smaller footprint, but overall, it's fine. And on top of it, I've got this Feelworld 7-inch monitor that lets me see what the camera sees, even though it's behind the teleprompter. So that's what's on my desk as of May of 2023. But more importantly, I'm curious what's on yours. What are you using to simplify your life or just improve your quality of life? Let me know down in the comments. And while you're down there, you can help me out a ton by liking and sharing this video. If you're new around here, I'll have a playlist of all of my productivity related content that I'll link over here on the side. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I'll see you in the next video.